What if the most unexpected moment of your life could change everything? Emma was mopping the marble floors of the Grand Marlowe Hotel, her tired eyes scanning the opulent lobby as she worked. She moved with a practiced ease, her mind elsewhere, as the rhythmic swish of the mop against the gleaming floors was the only sound filling the space. It was early morning, and the hotel was quiet, save for the soft click of the elevator doors opening and closing. The air smelled faintly of fresh linen and expensive perfume. She had cleaned this same lobby for months, maybe even years. Same routine, same guests, same polished floors. She was just one of the many invisible workers that made the hotel run smoothly, and as far as she was concerned, that was how she preferred it. The last thing she needed was to draw attention to herself. But on this particular morning, something happened that would change her life forever. It was a man. Tall, well-dressed, and a bit older than her, with salt and pepper hair and a demeanor that screamed wealth. He passed by her, but before she could lower her gaze in the usual act of blending into the background, he stopped. His sharp blue eyes caught hers, and there was something in them, a glimmer of curiosity. Emma felt a sudden tightening in her chest. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her, let alone someone like him. "Excuse me," the man said in a low voice, his accent vaguely American, but with a hint of something foreign she couldn't place. He looked at her, his eyes flickering as if something had just occurred to him. "I couldn't help but overhear you talking on the phone. Are you Dutch?" Her stomach did a flip. "Dutch? Yes, I am," Emma replied, her voice sounding smaller than she intended. She quickly wiped a spot on the floor, not quite meeting his eyes. The last thing she wanted was to draw attention to her origins. She had left the Netherlands to escape memories, not to carry them with her. "Interesting," he said, his tone thoughtful. "I didn't expect to hear Dutch in a place like this. I've been to Amsterdam a few times. Beautiful city. You don't sound like you're from around here. What brings you to the States?" Emma hesitated. This wasn't a conversation she had prepared for. Most of the guests here, the rich ones, never paid attention to the hotel staff beyond the bare minimum. She'd learned long ago to keep her answers short and neutral. "I work here," she said simply, her eyes now firmly on the floor. She hoped he would just move on and forget about her. But the man didn't leave. Yes, I can see that," he said, glancing at her mop and the cleaning supplies scattered at her feet. There was a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, but it wasn't condescending. It was curious. "What's your name, if you don't mind me asking?" Emma bit her lip, a slight unease prickling at the back of her neck. No one had ever asked her that before. Not the guests, not the other workers, no one. They all saw her as just a part of the background. She wasn't supposed to stand out. "Emma," she said, finally looking up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Emma," he repeated, as if savoring the name. "I'm Thomas, by the way. I'm staying here for a few days on business. But tell me, Emma, how long have you been working here?" His directness surprised her. Most people didn't bother with details like that. They just moved through their lives, oblivious to the ones who served them. A while," she replied, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Since I moved here." "How long ago was that?" Thomas pressed on, not giving up. Emma could feel his gaze on her, but she refused to look back directly. 3 years, she said, her voice growing quieter with each word. "I'm new to America." Thomas seemed to study her for a long moment, as if trying to read something in her eyes. Emma shifted uncomfortably under the intensity of his gaze. "You speak Dutch, I take it?" he asked, his tone now more conversational. "Yes," Emma said, nodding. "It's my first language." "Fascinating," Thomas said. He seemed to be thinking for a moment. "I was actually hoping to brush up on my Dutch. It's been years since I've had any reason to use it. Maybe we could." Before he could finish, a bell rang in the distance, and Emma glanced toward the lobby entrance. "Excuse me, sir. I have to get back to my work." The words came out without thought, a reflex to push him away, to avoid something she didn't understand. She wasn't used to people, especially men like him, paying attention to her. Not like this. Thomas smiled a little more knowingly now. Of course. I didn't mean to hold you up. But I'm here for a while, Emma. If you ever want to chat about Dutch or whatever, feel free to stop by. He turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing there, mop in hand, heart racing. She quickly finished her cleaning and moved to the break room, her mind still spinning. Who was that man? Why would he want to talk to her? People like Thomas didn't waste their time with people like her. She was just a hotel cleaner, a nobody in the grand scheme of things. He was rich, powerful, and important. She was just Emma. As she sat down in the staff room, trying to steady her breathing, she couldn't shake the encounter. Something about it felt different, unsettling. She had no idea then, but that moment, just a random, fleeting conversation, would set the stage for everything that was about to happen in her life. But she couldn't dwell on it. She had a job to do, and she couldn't afford to think about people like Thomas. Life in America had been hard enough as it was, and she didn't need any distractions. Still, as the hours passed and the hotel's guests came and went, Emma couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if she ever did take him up on his offer? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emma had spent most of her life blending in, trying to disappear into the background. As a young girl in the Netherlands, she'd always been the quiet one, the observant one, the one who didn't ask for much. She had learned early on that the less you asked for, the less you were disappointed. Her family was small but tight-knit, and Emma had always been the one who took care of the little things. Whether it was running errands for her parents, helping her younger brother with his homework, or simply keeping to herself when things got tough, Emma never made waves. But life, it seemed, had a way of making waves for her. At just 25, she found herself packing a suitcase and saying goodbye to everything she had known. Her decision wasn't something she had shared openly with anyone. It wasn't something that had been planned. It had just happened. One day, everything felt like it was slipping through her fingers, her family, her home, her peace of mind. She needed to get away. She moved to the United States with little more than the hope of starting fresh, of escaping the memories of a life that felt too small for her dreams. The reality, however, had been harsher than she had imagined. The hotel where she worked was nothing more than a temporary pit stop, a way to make ends meet while she figured out what came next. The job was grueling, the hours long, and the pay barely enough to cover her rent. But it was something. It was a lifeline. And sometimes, that's all you needed when you were trying to rebuild. As Emma swept the hallway floor one day, she thought back to her first few weeks at the hotel. She had arrived with big hopes, determined to find something better. But the hotel industry wasn't exactly where she'd expected to land. In reality, it was a world full of high-end guests who paid no attention to the staff who kept the place running. She was invisible, and for Emma, that was fine. She preferred it that way. Her manager, Claudia, was a no-nonsense woman who rarely smiled. She was efficient, and Emma had learned to mirror that efficiency, focusing on her work and keeping her personal life to herself. Over the months, Emma made a few friends here and there, but none of them felt like real friends. They were colleagues, and the idea of friendship felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Then there was Sophia, another housekeeper who had become Emma's closest friend at the hotel. Sophia had come to America from Mexico, and the two women had connected over their shared immigrant experience. Sophia was loud, bold, and never afraid to speak her mind, everything Emma wasn't. But despite their differences, they'd clicked, finding comfort in each other's company. "You know, Emma," Sophia had said to her one day, "sometimes I think we deserve more than this." More than cleaning up after these rich people who think the world revolves around them. Emma had smiled at the thought, but deep down, she didn't believe it. She didn't believe she deserved anything more than what she had. She was here to survive, not to dream. But then came Thomas. The memory of that first conversation in the lobby still lingered in her mind, like a scent she couldn't shake. Thomas had appeared out of nowhere, interrupting her carefully constructed routine. She didn't know why, but something about the way he looked at her made her feel as though she wasn't invisible anymore. There was an intensity to his gaze, a kind of curiosity that unsettled her. It had been weeks since that day, and yet she couldn't quite forget it. Emma found herself wondering what he saw in her. Why had he bothered to speak to her? Most guests didn't even notice the cleaning staff. But Thomas had. And not only had he noticed, but he'd spoken to her like she mattered. She caught herself thinking about him more often than she liked. His presence in the hotel was constant, and though she tried to avoid him, he seemed to find excuses to speak with her. At first, she convinced herself it was just idle curiosity on his part. Maybe he was just being polite. But then came the offer, and Emma had been thrown completely off balance. Thomas had asked her no, he had offered her a chance. A chance to leave the hotel behind and work for him, to step into a life far beyond the menial tasks she did every day. He had talked about her Dutch background, about her intellect, about how he could use someone like her. At first, Emma thought he was just a guest throwing around empty promises, trying to flatter her. But the way he spoke, he didn't sound like someone making small talk. There was something more to it. Her apartment felt even smaller when she thought about the possibility of stepping into a world that didn't belong to people like her. But it wasn't just any world. It was Thomas's world. The next morning, as she was preparing to head to the hotel, she bumped into Sophia in the staff room. Sophia had always been more outgoing, always eager to share her thoughts about life, love, and everything in between. "Girl, you look like you're in deep thought," Sophia remarked as she grabbed her coffee. "What's going on?" Emma smiled softly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing, really. Just work stuff." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Work stuff? Come on, I know you better than that. You've got that look in your eyes like something big is brewing inside that head of yours. Spit it out, Emma. What's on your mind?" Emma hesitated. She hadn't talked to anyone about the conversation with Thomas, and part of her didn't want to share it now. What if Sophia thought she was being foolish? What if she laughed at her for even considering it? But Sophia had always been a safe space for her. She was the only person who had shown any real understanding, and Emma trusted her more than she trusted anyone else. "I don't know," Emma began slowly. "Remember that guy, Thomas? The one who stayed here a while ago? He offered me a job." Sophia's eyes widened. "A job? Like what kind of job?" "You're talking about the millionaire businessman, right? The one who looked like he had it all." Emma nodded, still unsure how to explain the complexity of her emotions. "Yeah, he said I could work for him. He even suggested that I leave the hotel and come work for him in some capacity. Something better than this." Sophia leaned back in her chair, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Whoa! That's big, Emma. What did you say?" "I didn't say anything," Emma admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I couldn't. It's too much, don't you think?" Sophia was quiet for a moment, staring at Emma as if trying to read her thoughts. "I don't know, girl. It sounds like an opportunity to me. If you've been stuck here for 3 years, it's worth considering, right? A chance to get out, to do something different, to make more than just enough to scrape by." "I know," Emma said, fidgeting with the edge of her uniform. "But I'm not sure if it's for me. What if it's all just a game to him? What if I'm not really what he's looking for?" Sophia shook her head. "You can't think like that. You have to believe that you deserve better than this, Emma. You're smarter than most people here. You've got skills, things you haven't even tapped into yet. Who says you can't be more than just the hotel cleaner? I mean, look at you. You speak Dutch, you're hardworking, and you know how to keep your head down and get things done. That's more than most people can say. Emma looked at Sophia, her heart heavy. What if she was right? What if she wasn't meant to stay in the shadows of the hotel forever, wiping down surfaces and making beds for people who never even saw her? But the fear of the unknown, of leaving everything behind, clung to her. She didn't know if she could take the leap. Would you go for it? Emma asked, suddenly feeling vulnerable. If you were me, would you take the chance? Sophia smiled warmly. I would. You have nothing to lose. And besides, think about it. What's the worst that could happen? You go work for him and you hate it? Fine. You walk away. But you won't know until you try. And girl, if you don't try, you'll always wonder what might have been. The words hit Emma harder than she expected. It was so simple, yet so profound. What would it hurt to try? That evening, as she stood in the quiet of the hotel lobby, Emma found herself thinking about Thomas again. He was the kind of man who could make or break you, and right now, it felt like she was standing at the edge of a precipice. One step forward, and she might find a new life waiting for her. One step back, and she would stay right where she was. She thought of Sophia's words, "You have nothing to lose." Emma felt the weight of that statement, but also a strange lightness. For the first time in a long while, she realized she had a choice. She didn't have to remain invisible. She didn't have to be stuck forever. That night, when she got home, she made a decision. She would see where this could go. The next time Thomas asked, she would listen. And maybe, just maybe, she would take the first step toward something more. The following days passed in a blur. Emma found herself caught between her responsibilities at the hotel and the idea that had slowly started to take root in her mind, Thomas's offer. His words haunted her more with every passing hour. It wasn't the kind of offer a hotel cleaner like her could easily dismiss. There was something about the way he spoke to her, something about the confidence he had when he looked at her. It was unsettling, but it was also compelling. Her coworkers barely noticed the change in her. She continued her work as usual, cleaning rooms and corridors, her hands moving mechanically through the motions. But in her mind, she was elsewhere, on that verge of something new. What did it feel like to live outside of the cycle? To be more than just someone scrubbing floors and dealing with dirty laundry? Emma had been in survival mode for so long, and it was only now, as she stood back and took a hard look at her life, that she realized just how much she had been settling. She hadn't told Sophia yet whether she had decided to take Thomas up on his offer, but she could feel the pressure building. The offer, despite her initial hesitations, was too significant to ignore. For the first time, she felt like she was standing at a crossroads, a moment of choice that could change everything. That evening, after her shift ended, Emma went for a walk in the park near her apartment. The cool evening air felt refreshing against her skin, and the sounds of the city began to fade as she walked deeper into the quiet of the park. It was here, amidst the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of a distant bird, that Emma found herself finally able to think clearly. She sat on a bench by the lake, the water shimmering under the dim glow of streetlights. Her mind kept going back to one question: what do I really want? Is this it? She thought, looking around the park. Is this all I'll ever have? Emma had spent so many years just getting by, not daring to ask for more. Her parents had taught her to be modest, to be grateful for the little things in life. She had internalized those lessons deeply, even as she moved to a different country, trying to build a life from the ground up. But there was a difference between being humble and being resigned to your circumstances. The moment she had met Thomas, something had shifted inside of her. His world, his offers, his opportunities had sparked something in her. It was as if he had seen her potential before she could see it herself. But was it possible? Could she really leave her old life behind? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out. It was a message from Sophia. Are you still thinking about it? If you are, remember, sometimes the best things come when we least expect them. Don't let fear make your decisions. Emma smiled as she read the message. Sophia had always been the voice of reason, the one who encouraged her to take risks. It was just the push Emma needed. She typed a quick reply, "You're right. I'll talk to him tomorrow." Emma stood up, taking one last look at the peaceful park before heading back to her apartment. As she walked, her mind began to calm, a sense of determination slowly taking root in her chest. The decision was made. She would go through with it. The next morning, she was back at the Grand Marlowe Hotel, preparing for her usual shift. The place felt different today, heavier somehow, as though the weight of the decision she had made was already hanging over her. But she pushed the feeling aside. She had work to do. At noon, when the lobby was quieter, Thomas walked in. As usual, he was impeccably dressed in a sharp suit, his dark hair neatly combed, and his gaze focused on the task at hand. But as soon as he saw Emma, his expression softened, and he walked toward her. "Good afternoon, Emma," he said, his voice warm and confident. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work." She smiled, her nerves suddenly flaring. "No, not at all. Just finishing up." "I was hoping we could have a moment to talk," he said, his tone inviting but also hinting at something more serious. Emma's heart skipped a beat, and she motioned toward the back hallway where they could talk privately. They walked together down the corridor, her mind racing with questions. She had spent days trying to anticipate what this conversation would feel like, but now that it was happening, she felt a knot in her stomach. They reached a quiet corner near the staff break room, away from the bustling guests, and Thomas turned to face her. "I wanted to follow up on our conversation last week," he began, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of expectation. "I know I must have surprised you with my offer, but I wanted to say that I'm serious. I believe you have a lot of potential. A lot more than what you're doing here." Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. This was it. The moment she had been both dreading and anticipating. "Thank you," she said softly. "I've been thinking about it a lot, actually. And I've decided. I'm willing to give it a try." Thomas's eyes lit up. He stepped closer, his expression a mixture of encouragement and relief. "I'm glad to hear that, Emma. I think this could be a great opportunity for you. We'll start small, nothing too overwhelming at first, but I think you'll find it to be the right move." Emma nodded, her heart still pounding. "What exactly would I be doing?" Thomas took a step back, taking a deep breath before explaining. "We have a few projects that need someone with your skills. We'll begin with a few administrative tasks, possibly handling some communications in Dutch, helping with translations. But as you gain experience, I'd like to expand your role. Eventually, I see you being more involved in business strategy, possibly even helping with international relations. I think you have a unique perspective, Emma. You're more than just a housekeeper." Her breath caught in her chest. The possibilities sounded far beyond what she had imagined. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future, one where she wasn't just cleaning other people's messes, but instead shaping something for herself. "Okay," she said, her voice firm now. "I'm in. Let's do this." Thomas smiled, and for a moment, Emma saw something in his eyes. Genuine admiration, perhaps, or maybe just the satisfaction of having found someone he believed in. "Great," he said, offering her his hand. "I'm looking forward to this, Emma. You won't regret it." As she shook his hand, something shifted inside of her. She had taken the first step into a new world, a world where she was no longer invisible. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long while, Emma felt a glimmer of hope. The days following Emma's decision felt like a whirlwind, a rush of new emotions, challenges, and opportunities. Her routine at the Grand Marlowe was no longer the anchor of her life, and instead, she began to immerse herself in a different kind of work, one that held the promise of something greater. On her first official day working with Thomas, she felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The grand office building, towering above the city, was a far cry from the hotel. It was sleek, polished, and smelled of freshly brewed coffee and high-end leather. Everything from the marble floors to the sharp suits of the employees screamed success, and Emma couldn't help but feel a little out of place as she stepped into the lobby. As soon as she walked through the doors, a well-dressed receptionist, a woman in her 30s with blonde hair tied up in a tight bun, greeted her. "You must be Emma. Mr. Stone has been expecting you." Emma nodded, her voice barely above a whisper as she said, "Yes, that's me." The receptionist handed her a visitor's pass and directed her to the elevator, where Emma's heart raced with every passing floor. She had done cleaning jobs in hotels, sure, but this was different. "This is real," she thought, as she adjusted her uniform, which now seemed out of place in the upscale surroundings. When she arrived at the top floor, she was led into a modern conference room where Thomas was already waiting for her. He rose from his chair as she entered, smiling warmly. "Welcome, Emma. I'm glad you could join us today," he said. "Have a seat. We'll get started with some basics and go over what you'll be doing for the next few weeks." As Emma sat down, she couldn't help but notice how natural Thomas seemed in this setting. He exuded a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from years of experience. He was completely at ease, while Emma felt like a fish out of water. First, Thomas began, "I want to go over the core tasks I'd like you to help with. I know you're more familiar with hospitality than business operations, so don't worry about jumping into anything too complex just yet. We'll ease you in." Emma nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She tried to look confident, but she could feel the tremors in her palms. This was all so new. She had to remind herself that she had made this choice. It was time to embrace it. "Your first task will involve some administrative work, mostly organizing documents and handling translations for our international clients. You'll be working closely with Nadia, who manages our overseas accounts. She'll help you get up to speed on things." Thomas paused, letting his words sink in. "But as you get more comfortable with the job, I want you to start contributing ideas, especially on the business strategy front. We'll have meetings, and I'll need your input on expanding our reach in the Dutch market." The mention of the Dutch market made Emma's heart race. She had never thought of herself as someone with a voice in the business world, let alone someone who could provide input on an international strategy. But the more Thomas spoke, the more she realized just how much potential he saw in her. "I'll do my best," Emma said, her voice more confident now. Thomas smiled approvingly. "I believe you will." Over the next few weeks, Emma found herself in the midst of a steep learning curve. Nadia, who had initially seemed distant, gradually warmed to her. She patiently explained the intricacies of the work, teaching Emma how to handle spreadsheets, set up meetings, and, most importantly, navigate the complex world of international business dealings. Though Emma felt overwhelmed at times, she couldn't deny the satisfaction she felt when she completed a task or offered a translation that made a difference. Slowly but surely, she began to feel more at home in her new role. But there was one part of the job that kept gnawing at her: the meetings. Every week, Thomas would gather the team to discuss upcoming projects, progress on existing ones, and ideas for expanding their business. Emma had been invited to sit in on these meetings, and although she had only been in the company for a short time, she knew that her input was expected. One afternoon, as the team sat around a sleek glass table discussing their strategy for reaching Dutch clients, Emma could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She had studied the market, done the research, and formulated a few ideas that she thought could help the company expand. But the thought of sharing her ideas in front of all these successful, powerful people made her throat dry. Thomas noticed her unease and leaned in slightly, his voice low so only she could hear. "Don't hold back, Emma. Your perspective is valuable here. They want to hear what you have to say." The words felt like a lifeline, and for the first time, Emma allowed herself to speak up. She shared her thoughts on how the company could engage with Dutch clients through targeted social media campaigns, focusing on aspects of their culture that would resonate with them on a personal level. To her surprise, Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "That's a solid idea," he said, before turning to the team. "We'll implement this approach and see how it pans out. Emma, we'll need you to lead the charge on this. You've got the insight." The room went silent for a moment, and Emma could hardly believe what she was hearing. She had just made her first real contribution to the company, and it had been received with genuine interest and support. The nerves that had plagued her at the beginning began to fade, replaced with a growing sense of pride. The days that followed were a blur of excitement and hard work. Emma found herself taking on more responsibilities, managing small projects, and even contributing to larger discussions about the future of the company. The world she had once only dreamed of was now her reality, and although it wasn't always easy, Emma was beginning to feel like she belonged there. But as her professional life flourished, Emma's personal life seemed to be in a constant state of flux. The more she dove into her new job, the less time she had for anything else. She still lived in her small apartment, but now it felt different, distant, like it didn't quite fit who she was becoming. And there were moments when she wondered if she had lost touch with who she was before all of this, before Thomas's offer had come into her life. Still, she reminded herself that this was a new beginning. A chance to redefine who she was, to prove to herself that she could rise above the limitations she had set for herself. And with every new challenge, every new success, she realized that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the weeks turned into months, Emma became more accustomed to her new life at the company. Each day, she walked into the high-rise office building with more confidence than the day before. The tasks that once felt foreign, overseeing projects, attending strategy meetings, managing clients, were now becoming second nature. She had transformed from a hotel cleaner to an integral part of the team at Thomas's company, and the sense of accomplishment that came with each milestone was palpable. But despite her growing success at work, Emma couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was missing. She found herself more disconnected from her old life, from the friends she had left behind at the hotel, and even from the community she had once known. It was as if she was slipping further away from the woman she had been. The woman who had once been so sure of her simple, modest life, content to go about her days with little more than the satisfaction of a job well done. One evening, as Emma sat at her desk, typing up an email to a Dutch client, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Sophia. "Hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. How's the new job? We need to catch up soon. Let me know when you're free." Emma stared at the message for a moment, the familiar sense of guilt creeping in. She hadn't been in touch with Sophia for weeks. She hadn't had time for much of anything, it seemed. Still, she couldn't ignore the pull of her old friend's message, and she quickly typed back, "I've been busy. But let's catch up this weekend. I'll make time." The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, reports, and deadlines. Thomas's company was expanding rapidly, and with that came increased pressure. Emma's responsibilities grew along with the company's success, and soon she was coordinating entire campaigns and acting as a liaison between Thomas and international partners. It felt like the weight of the world was on her shoulders, but for the first time in her life, she was handling it. Then came the moment that would test everything she had worked for. It was early one Tuesday morning when Emma received an unexpected call from Thomas's assistant. "Emma, Thomas needs you in his office right away." "We've got a situation," the assistant said, her voice tense. "A client in the Netherlands has pulled out of a major deal, and we need to come up with a solution fast. Thomas wants you to handle this." Emma's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had been dreading, the day when everything she had learned would be put to the test. She quickly grabbed her laptop and rushed to Thomas's office, trying to steady her nerves. When she arrived, Thomas was already deep in conversation with several senior executives, but when he saw her, he motioned for her to come in. "Emma, I need you to take the lead on this one," Thomas said, his voice firm but reassuring. "We've just lost a key client in the Netherlands, and it's going to be a major setback if we don't act quickly. I'm confident you're the right person to turn this around." Emma swallowed hard, her mind racing. "Me?" she thought. She had only been with the company for a few months, and now she was being asked to fix a situation that could affect the entire business. The pressure was overwhelming, but Emma knew this was what she had been working toward. This was her chance to prove herself. "I'll take care of it," Emma said, her voice surprisingly steady. Thomas nodded approvingly. "I'm counting on you. Let me know if you need anything." With that, the meeting broke up, and Emma was left standing in the center of the room, feeling the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. This wasn't just about a project or a strategy anymore. It was about the company's reputation, its future, and her own future within it. She quickly began to gather the information she needed, the client's concerns, the reasons behind their decision, and the details of the original proposal. As she sifted through the data, she began to realize just how big of a task this was. The client had pulled out due to a lack of confidence in the company's ability to meet their needs. Emma knew that winning them back wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't about to give up without a fight. The next day, Emma arranged a video conference with the Dutch client. She prepared her talking points, carefully crafting a response that would address their concerns and offer a solution. As the time for the call approached, she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. This was her first real test as a businesswoman, and she wasn't going to let Thomas or herself down. The call finally began, and the client's representative appeared on the screen. He was a middle-aged man with a sharp look in his eyes, and he didn't waste any time getting to the point. "Ms. Stone, I'm glad you're handling this personally. Our company has been following your firm's progress, but there were a few issues with the last proposal that we just couldn't overlook. Frankly, we've decided to pull out of the deal." Emma took a deep breath, keeping her composure. "I understand your concerns, and I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. Let me address the issues you raised." She launched into a well-rehearsed explanation of the changes that the company had made since their initial proposal, how they had refined their approach, improved their services, and ensured they would be able to meet the client's needs moving forward. She presented new data, updated timelines, and even suggested a few ways they could tailor their services specifically for the client's market. The conversation lasted for nearly an hour, and Emma felt the pressure building with every passing minute. But when it was over, the client's representative finally spoke. "I'll be honest, Ms. Stone," he said. "I wasn't expecting such a thorough response. You've addressed our concerns head-on, and I'm willing to reconsider our position. I'll need to discuss this with my team, but you've certainly given us something to think about." Emma's heart soared. She had done it. She had managed to turn the situation around. The client wasn't ready to commit just yet, but they were open to further discussion. That was a huge win. After the call ended, Emma immediately contacted Thomas to update him on the situation. He was ecstatic when he heard the news. "Emma, that was incredible. You've done what most people would have thought impossible," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "I knew you had it in you." Emma smiled, the weight of the past few days finally lifting off her shoulders. This was the moment she had been waiting for, proof that she belonged in this world. The pressure had been immense, but she had handled it, and in doing so, she had earned the respect of not only the client, but also her colleagues and, most importantly, herself. But even as the success settled in, Emma couldn't ignore the feeling that her journey was far from over. She had passed her first test, but there would be many more challenges ahead. And with each challenge, she knew she would grow even stronger. As she left the office that evening, a sense of satisfaction washed over her. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Though Emma's professional life had skyrocketed, the remnants of her past began to creep back into her mind with increasing frequency. Each accomplishment she achieved, each challenge she overcame, felt like a step away from the life she had once known. The hotel, Sophia, and even the familiar streets of her old neighborhood now seemed like distant memories, lost to the whirlwind of her transformation. But the past, as Emma was learning, was never as easily left behind as one might hope. It wasn't just the people she had known or the simple comfort of her old life. It was the struggle, the feeling of barely getting by, that she had worked so hard to escape. It was still in her blood, in her bones, and every once in a while, it would make its presence known, reminding her that even the best of changes couldn't erase the mark of where she had come from. Her phone buzzed one evening as she sat in her spacious apartment, a stark contrast to the small, modest flat she used to call home. The message was from Sophia. "We need to talk. Call me when you can." Sophia's tone was serious, and it immediately set Emma on edge. It had been weeks since they last spoke, and now the familiar weight of guilt sat heavily on her chest. She hadn't had the time or the energy to reconnect with her old life, and the longer she avoided it, the more complicated things seemed to get. Emma had been so wrapped up in her work, her new role, her new world, that the people she once cared about had begun to fade into the background. She had promised herself she wouldn't forget her roots, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to juggle both sides of her existence. She wasn't sure what to expect from this conversation, but one thing was certain: the past was no longer willing to stay silent. With a deep breath, she dialed Sophia's number. "Emma," Sophia's voice sounded on the other end, laced with concern. "I don't know what's going on with you lately. You've changed. You're hardly ever around anymore, and when you are, it's like you're a stranger." "I know, Sophia," Emma replied quietly. "I've been busy. The job's demanding. I'm sorry I haven't been there." "It's not just that. It's like you've forgotten where you came from," Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. "You can't just leave everything behind. You're still you, right?" Emma hesitated. "Am I still me?" It was a question she had asked herself on more than one occasion, but never aloud. She had tried so hard to prove she could fit into this new world, to embrace the role Thomas and the company had given her. But in doing so, she felt the old parts of her past, her friends, her simpler life, slipping away. "I haven't forgotten," Emma said, her voice tinged with regret. "I'm just trying to build something new. I don't want to be stuck in the past anymore." Sophia was silent for a moment, and Emma could hear the faint sound of a sigh. "Emma, I get it. But just because you're moving forward doesn't mean you have to forget the people who were there for you when you had nothing. You can't just shut us out." The words stung, but they also hit close to the truth. She had distanced herself not just from her past, but from the people who had been part of that world, who had supported her when she had nothing to give in return. "I know. I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "I didn't mean to hurt you. It's just, things are moving so fast, and I didn't know how to balance everything." Sophia's tone softened, but there was still an edge to it. "Look, I'm happy for you. I really am. You've worked hard to get where you are. But don't lose yourself in all of it. Don't forget who you are or where you came from. You owe it to yourself." Emma let the words sink in. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for certain: Sophia was right. No matter how much she had changed, how much she had achieved, she could never lose sight of the person she had been, the person who had fought so hard to rise above her circumstances. "I won't forget. I promise," Emma said, her voice more certain now. They talked for a little longer, and by the time the conversation ended, Emma felt a sense of relief mixed with the familiar ache of nostalgia. She knew it wasn't going to be easy to reconnect with her past, to find a balance between her new life and the person she had once been. But it was something she needed to do. For herself. For the people who had been there when no one else had. As Emma hung up the phone, she stared out the window of her apartment. The city stretched out before her, with its lights flickering in the distance, and for a moment, she felt the weight of it all. She had come so far, and yet there was still so much more to figure out. Her mind wandered back to the hotel, to the people she had worked with, and to the memories of a simpler life. She missed Sophia's laugh, the way they used to talk for hours about nothing at all, the comfort of knowing that she wasn't alone. She missed the quiet satisfaction of doing a job well, even if it was just making beds or cleaning bathrooms. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and it was enough. But that life, the one she had left behind, wasn't the life she had chosen anymore. She had made a decision to push herself beyond what she thought was possible. She wasn't the hotel cleaner anymore. She was Emma Stone, a key player in an international business, and she had earned her place there. Still, as she sat back in her chair, she couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how far she went, no matter how much success she achieved, the shadows of her past would always follow her. They would always be there, a part of her that couldn't be erased. And maybe that was okay. The next morning, Emma woke up earlier than usual. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty, and she knew she needed to make a change. She couldn't ignore her roots any longer, and she wasn't going to let her past define her either. It was time to find the balance between who she had been and who she was becoming. And so, with a newfound resolve, Emma set off for another day at work, determined to face whatever came her way, while never forgetting the person who had started this journey in the first place. The days following Emma's heartfelt conversation with Sophia felt like a new beginning. She had promised herself she would find a balance between the person she had become and the one she had been, but the reality of doing so was much harder than she had anticipated. Her job at Thomas's company continued to demand her full attention, and each day felt like an uphill climb as she juggled her responsibilities and the weight of her personal reflections. The hotel, her former life, and the friendships she had once cherished seemed like distant memories, but they still lingered in the back of her mind. Sophia's words echoed in her thoughts every time she walked into the high-rise building where she now worked, every time she passed by the luxurious restaurants or elite gatherings she had grown so accustomed to. Was it really possible to live in two worlds, one of polished glass and boardrooms, the other of simple apartments and shared dinners with friends? But Emma had learned an invaluable lesson in her journey thus far. The future she had longed for, the one she'd fought to create, wouldn't be handed to her. It was something she needed to actively work for, to shape with both hands, just as she had done when she was still cleaning hotel rooms. And as the next phase of her life began to unfold, Emma was about to find that the real test would come not from the challenges at work, but from within herself. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Emma was called into Thomas's office once again. This time, there was no crisis, no urgent matter that required her immediate attention. Instead, Thomas was seated behind his desk, looking unusually calm and collected. He smiled when Emma entered, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Emma, please have a seat," he said, his voice warm and inviting. Emma did as instructed, her curiosity piqued by the relaxed atmosphere. She had grown used to Thomas's usually brisk and businesslike demeanor, and this more casual approach caught her off guard. "You've been doing fantastic work lately," he began, leaning back in his chair. "The project with the Dutch client was impressive, and your efforts to help us expand into new markets haven't gone unnoticed. I want you to know that you've become an indispensable part of this company." Emma smiled, the praise giving her a surge of pride. But there was something in his tone that hinted at more than just a casual conversation. Her gut instinct told her that this wasn't just about her recent accomplishments. "I'm glad to hear that." Thank you, Thomas. I've been learning a lot, and it feels great to be part of something bigger. Thomas nodded. Well, you're not just part of it anymore, Emma. I want to offer you something more, a chance to take on a leadership role within the company. I've been considering this for a while, and I believe you're ready for it. The words hung in the air, and Emma's heart skipped a beat. A leadership role? It was everything she had worked for, everything she had strived to achieve. But with it came an undeniable sense of uncertainty. Leadership meant even more responsibility, more pressure, and a deeper commitment to the future of the company and her own future. I'm honored, Thomas, Emma said, her voice steady despite the flood of thoughts racing through her mind. But I have to admit, I'm a little overwhelmed. I've only been here for a few months, and the pace is already so fast. What would this new role entail? Thomas's smile widened, and he leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the desk. It's a big step, I won't lie to you. But you've shown me that you have the vision, the drive, and the ability to lead. This role would involve overseeing a new division of the company, one focused on international growth. You'd manage teams across multiple countries, strategize expansions, and be responsible for ensuring we remain competitive in global markets. Emma listened intently, her mind whirling. This was everything she had ever dreamed of, yet there was something else lingering. The pressure. The weight of it all. Could she handle it? Could she keep pushing forward, balancing this new world with the life she had left behind? And I'd be working with you directly? Emma asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Exactly, Thomas replied. We'd be collaborating closely to develop and execute plans. But you'd be leading the charge on this new initiative. I have full confidence in your abilities. The room seemed to close in around her as Emma processed the offer. She had come so far, worked so hard to prove herself. But this was the next step. The one that would define her future. And at the same time, it felt like it would pull her further away from everything that had grounded her. I'll need some time to think about it, Emma said finally, her voice measured. This is a huge decision, and I want to be sure I'm ready for it. Thomas's expression softened. Of course, take all the time you need. I want you to be confident in your decision. But know this. The opportunity is yours if you want it. As Emma left Thomas's office that afternoon, her mind was spinning. She stood in the elevator, staring at her reflection in the polished steel, trying to process the magnitude of what had just been offered to her. She had dreamed of this moment, of proving herself, of climbing the ladder to success. But now that the opportunity was here, it didn't feel quite as clear-cut as she had imagined. The stakes were higher. The responsibility was greater. And with each step forward, Emma knew that she would have to leave more of her old life behind. The simplicity of her past, her friends, her small apartment, the quiet joy of being unnoticed, was slipping away with every new challenge she faced. Would she be willing to pay that price for success? That night, as Emma lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling, wrestling with her thoughts. The future was calling to her, but it was also asking her to sacrifice more than she was sure she was ready to give. She had come so far from the woman who cleaned hotel rooms for a living, but was she prepared to leave behind the part of her that still felt connected to that life? The next day, Emma met with Sophia for coffee. It had been weeks since they had talked in person, and she was eager to reconnect, to seek some clarity. Sophia had always been the one who could help her see things more clearly, and Emma needed that guidance more than ever. As they sat down at the cafe, Sophia looked at her with a knowing smile. You're thinking about the offer, aren't you? Emma nodded, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Yeah, I'm just not sure if I'm ready for everything that comes with it. It's a huge step, and I don't know if I'm willing to give up more of my old life to make it happen. Sophia's expression softened, and she leaned in slightly. Emma, you're already changing. But that doesn't mean you have to lose yourself in the process. The old you doesn't have to vanish, and you don't have to sacrifice everything for success. Just remember to hold on to the things that really matter." Emma's heart felt lighter at her words. Maybe Sophia was right. Maybe the balance wasn't about choosing one life over the other. Maybe it was about blending both, finding a way to succeed while still holding on to the things that truly mattered. "Thanks, Sophia," Emma said quietly. "I think I needed to hear that." Sophia smiled warmly. "Anytime, Em. You're not alone in this. Whatever you decide, you've got me, and that's all that matters." As Emma left the cafe that day, she felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in weeks. The road ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: she was ready to face it on her own terms. The future was hers to shape, and she would make sure that in the process, she never lost sight of the woman who had come so far. As the weeks wore on, the weight of the decision continued to press down on Emma. She had tried to focus on her work, but every moment spent on the latest projects or in meetings with Thomas felt like a distraction from the internal battle that raged within her. The offer for the leadership role lingered in her mind, and with it came an overwhelming sense of pressure. Would accepting it define who she was? Would it mean sacrificing everything she had once known for the sake of a future that seemed, at times, so distant and foreign? Emma had spent so much of her life trying to escape the limitations of her past that she wasn't sure anymore what was worth keeping and what was worth letting go. She had always prided herself on her ability to rise above her circumstances, but now that she was at the peak of her success, she was starting to question what it had all meant. Was it enough to be successful in the eyes of others, or was there more she needed to be truly content? The tipping point came on a rainy Thursday evening. It had been a long day at the office, and Emma's head was spinning from back-to-back meetings. Her phone buzzed as she left the building, a text from Sophia reading, "I've been thinking about you. You haven't been yourself lately. Let's catch up tonight." Emma felt a pang of guilt. She had been so consumed by the new responsibilities and the weight of her decision that she hadn't made time for her friend. Sophia had been the one constant in her life, the one person who had never asked for anything other than her genuine presence. It was time to reconnect. As she arrived at Sophia's apartment later that evening, she found herself feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Sophia greeted her warmly, her eyes filled with concern. "You look like you've been carrying the world on your shoulders," Sophia said as they sat down on the couch, mugs of tea in hand. "Talk to me, Em." Emma exhaled deeply, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know what to do, Sophia. Thomas has offered me a major role in the company. It's everything I've worked for, and I know it would be a huge opportunity. But I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this. I'm not sure who I am anymore." Sophia listened carefully, her expression softening as Emma spoke. She could hear the struggle in her friend's voice, the internal war between the woman she had become and the woman she still felt connected to, the one who had cleaned rooms in a hotel and dreamed of something better. "I get it, Em," Sophia said gently. "You've worked so hard to get where you are. But it's okay to feel conflicted. You're changing, and change is never easy. The thing is, you've always been about more than just success. It's about balance, about finding a way to honor who you are no matter where you are." Emma leaned back against the couch, her mind still whirling. But what if I can't balance both? What if I lose everything I've worked for if I try to hold on to the past? What if I'm just not enough for this role? Sophia shook her head. "You're not losing yourself, Emma. You're evolving. The question isn't whether you can do it. The question is what kind of life you want to live. You can't sacrifice your happiness, your connections, your past, just to climb higher. But you can build a future that reflects who you are, even if that future looks different from the one you imagined when you first started." The words resonated with Emma, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a small flicker of clarity. Maybe Sophia was right. Maybe it wasn't about choosing one life over the other. Maybe it was about creating something new that incorporated both. Her success wasn't just a product of her hard work. It was a reflection of her ability to adapt, to learn, and to move forward, but still carry the strength of her roots. "You're right," Emma said slowly, a light dawning in her eyes. "I don't have to lose everything to gain something more. I can choose both. It's not about perfect balance, but about being true to myself while embracing the future." Sophia smiled, reaching over to squeeze Emma's hand. "Exactly. And whatever you decide, I'm with you. You've already proven that you're capable of anything. Just don't forget to take care of yourself along the way." Emma nodded, feeling the weight in her chest lift. It wasn't going to be easy, but she finally felt like she had a clearer path forward. The choice was still hers to make, but she was beginning to understand that it wasn't about perfection. It was about staying grounded in who she was, even as she moved toward what she wanted to become. The next day at work, Emma found herself standing before Thomas in his office once again. The decision that had consumed her for weeks was now finally coming to a head. She had spent the night reflecting, considering all that she had gained and all that she could still lose. But one thing had become crystal clear: her journey was hers to define, and she would do it on her own terms. "Thomas," Emma began, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "I've given this a lot of thought, and I'm ready to accept the role. But I want to make sure that as I take on more responsibility, I don't lose the things that are most important to me: my personal life, my connections, and the balance I've been striving for." Thomas regarded her with an inscrutable expression for a moment, then nodded. "I think that's very wise, Emma. This company is about growth, not just professionally, but personally. I'm glad you've thought this through, and I respect your decision." Emma felt a sense of relief flood through her. The pressure, the doubt, the fear, all of it seemed to dissipate in that moment. She had made the decision to embrace her future, but she had done so in a way that still honored her past. She could do both. She could rise to the occasion, but without sacrificing the core of who she was. As she left Thomas's office, the weight of her decision lifted from her shoulders. It wasn't going to be easy, but Emma was ready to face the challenges, the sacrifices, and the opportunities that lay ahead. She wasn't just a hotel cleaner anymore. She wasn't just a rising businesswoman. She was Emma Stone, and she was ready to embrace all the parts of herself. The journey was far from over, but Emma knew one thing for certain: she was no longer defined by her past. She was the author of her own future. The week following Emma's decision felt like a whirlwind. She had officially accepted the leadership role offered by Thomas, and the weight of that commitment began to settle into her bones. There was no turning back now, but the knowledge that she had taken control of her own destiny gave her a sense of confidence she had never fully experienced before. Emma was stepping into a new chapter of her life, one that would test her, stretch her, and ultimately help her evolve into someone who could bridge her past and future. In the days that followed, Emma's schedule was filled with back-to-back meetings, strategy sessions, and conference calls as she adjusted to the fast-paced, high-pressure world of corporate leadership. Thomas had been supportive but clear in his expectations. She was expected to hit the ground running, bringing fresh ideas and the kind of strategic thinking that would propel the company forward in the international market. The team she was now leading was diverse, made up of experts in various sectors of the business, from finance to marketing to operations. Emma had always been a quick learner, and she adapted swiftly to the new role, earning the respect of her colleagues. Yet, as days turned into weeks, she began to feel the tension between her old life and her new one. The late nights at the office left little time for her personal life, and Emma found herself growing more and more isolated, missing the simple moments she once shared with Sophia and her friends. Her apartment, which had once been her sanctuary, now felt like an empty shell. She no longer had time to host dinners or share impromptu moments with friends. The small gatherings she used to enjoy seemed like distant memories, replaced by endless spreadsheets, reports, and plans that stretched late into the night. One night, after a particularly grueling meeting, Emma sat alone in her office, staring at her laptop screen. Her reflection was dim in the darkened room, and she could barely make out the outlines of her own face. The weight of everything, her responsibilities, the expectations, and the sacrifices pressed down on her chest, suffocating her. Was this really what she had worked so hard for? It was in these moments of solitude that Emma realized how much she missed the feeling of being connected to her roots. She longed for the simplicity of her previous life, where things weren't so complicated and she had time to breathe. The balance she had hoped to find felt increasingly elusive. That evening, as Emma left the office after another long day, she received a text from Sophia. "Are you free this weekend? I think we both need a break." Emma's heart lifted as she read the message. She hadn't realized just how much she needed this. Sophia had always been a grounding force in her life, the person who reminded her of who she was beyond the suits and the corporate strategies. She needed that reminder more than ever. "Yes, let's do it," Emma typed quickly. "I'll come over Saturday morning." We need some serious downtime. Saturday arrived, and Emma found herself at Sophia's apartment, greeted by the familiar scent of coffee and the cozy warmth of her friend's home. Sophia was standing by the counter, pouring 2 cups of coffee. She turned as Emma entered, her smile wide and comforting. "I'm so glad you're here," Sophia said, handing her a cup. "Now, tell me what's been going on. You look like you haven't slept in days." Emma laughed softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's just, everything's so fast-paced now. I'm trying to keep up with everything, and I feel like I'm losing sight of who I am. I'm constantly juggling work and personal life, and I don't know where I fit in anymore." Sophia set her cup down and crossed the room to sit next to Emma. "I've seen you go through a lot, Em. You've climbed so high, but you've got to remember, success isn't just about achievements. It's about the people you share your life with, the moments you don't want to forget. It's okay to slow down sometimes. You don't need to be everything to everyone." Emma felt a lump form in her throat as she thought about everything she had sacrificed. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "I know I've changed, but I didn't realize how much until now." Sophia squeezed her hand, giving her a soft smile. "You've changed, yes, but you're still you. You just need to reconnect with what matters most. That's the key to finding your balance." For the first time in weeks, Emma let herself relax. The constant hum of her work life faded into the background as she enjoyed the warmth of her friends' company. They spent the afternoon catching up, reminiscing about their old lives and sharing stories that reminded Emma of the person she used to be. It was exactly what she needed. The following Monday, Emma returned to work with a renewed sense of purpose. She was determined to find a way to merge her professional growth with her personal happiness, to remember the things that had always grounded her. As she walked into the office, she noticed a subtle shift in her perspective. The constant rush and pressure didn't seem as overwhelming as it had before. She wasn't going to allow herself to get lost in the whirlwind of success. Her first step toward this new approach was to delegate more effectively. Emma had always been someone who took on every task herself, driven by a need to prove she could handle anything. But she realized that to lead successfully, she had to trust others and let go of the burden of doing it all. She called a meeting with her team and set clearer expectations, encouraging them to take ownership of their own projects while still keeping the big picture in mind. It was a small change, but it allowed Emma to breathe a little easier. That afternoon, Thomas called her into his office for a check-in. "Emma, I've been watching your progress closely," he said as she sat down. "You've done a great job so far, and I can see that the new team dynamics are already working in your favor. But I want to ask, how are you feeling about everything?" Emma hesitated, then smiled. "I'm adjusting. I've learned that it's okay to ask for help and to trust my team more. I don't have to do everything myself, and that's been a relief." Thomas raised an eyebrow, his expression thoughtful. "That's a good realization. Leadership isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about empowering others to excel." I'm glad you're finding that balance. Emma nodded, grateful for his support. Thank you. I'm still learning, but I think I'm getting there. As she left his office, Emma felt a renewed sense of control over her own life. She wasn't perfect, and she knew there would still be tough days ahead. But she had made it this far, and she was determined to keep moving forward, making choices that felt right for her, even if they weren't always easy. That night, as Emma sat down to dinner alone in her apartment, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She had come a long way from the hotel cleaner who had once dreamed of something better. And while her future was still uncertain, one thing was clear: Emma was finally learning to embrace the complexity of her journey. She wasn't just a product of her past, nor was she defined by the world of corporate success. She was both, someone who could create a future that honored all the pieces of who she was, no matter where it took her. The months that followed Emma's realization marked a turning point in her life. Though the pressures of her new role as a leader at the company still weighed heavily on her, the clarity she had gained from reconnecting with her past, her friendships, her values allowed her to navigate the chaos with a sense of peace she had never before known. Slowly, Emma found herself not just surviving in the corporate world, but thriving in it. She was no longer burdened by the fear of losing herself. Instead, she was building a future that was shaped by both her past and present. Her relationship with Thomas had evolved, too. In the beginning, there had been a sense of professional distance, a quiet understanding that they were colleagues, with no room for personal connection. But as the months passed, Emma discovered a more genuine rapport with him. He respected her intelligence, her work ethic, and most importantly, her vision for the company. The power dynamics, once intimidating, had softened into a professional partnership built on mutual respect. Despite this, Emma knew there was a limit to how much she could lean on Thomas. She had come to this position on her own, and she intended to continue carving her own path forward. She was proud of what she had accomplished, but she knew that her true success would never be measured by the titles she held or the accolades she received. It would be measured by the person she had become. One afternoon, Emma was in the middle of a particularly important meeting when she received a text from Sophia. "You're going to be okay, Em. I believe in you." Sophia had been a constant source of support, always pushing her to see the bigger picture, reminding her that it wasn't just the destination that mattered, it was the journey. That afternoon, Emma realized just how much Sophia had been right. The journey wasn't just about climbing to the top, it was about how she got there and who she became along the way. The next few weeks were pivotal. Emma found a new sense of work-life balance. She made a point of carving out time for her personal life, re-engaging with her friends, and rediscovering the things that brought her peace. Weekends were no longer just for work catch-up, they became a time for exploration and reflection. She joined Sophia for weekend hikes, spent evenings cooking at home, and even took up painting again, something she hadn't done since she was a child. One Friday evening, as Emma wrapped up a meeting with her team, she felt a rush of satisfaction that surprised her. The project they had been working on for months was finally complete, and it was everything she had hoped for: innovative, efficient, and game-changing. The company's international expansion was poised for success, and Emma was leading it. She stood by her office window, looking out at the city skyline as the sun dipped below the horizon. The lights of the city twinkled below, and Emma felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had arrived at a place she once only dreamed of, but the path to this moment hadn't been a straight line. It had been a journey of growth, both personally and professionally. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down to see a message from Thomas. "Great work today, Emma. You're making a real impact. I'm proud of you." Emma smiled, feeling the pride swell in her chest. It wasn't just about the project's success, it was about the fact that she had made it on her own terms. Her past had shaped her, but it didn't define her. She had built something from the ground up, and it was her foundation to stand on, not someone else's. That weekend, after a long week of work, Emma found herself in Sophia's apartment once again. This time, they were joined by a few of their old friends, and the apartment buzzed with laughter and the clinking of glasses. It was a night of celebration, not for any particular achievement, but for the joy of simply being present in the moment. As they sat around the table, Sophia raised her glass. To Emma, she said, her smile radiant. For everything she's accomplished and for staying true to herself through it all. Everyone cheered, and Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest. Her friends had always believed in her, even when she hadn't been sure of herself. They had seen her potential long before she had ever seen it herself. Emma stood, raising her glass in return. To all of you, she said, her voice strong. For being there, for never giving up on me, and for reminding me of who I really am. This journey wouldn't have been the same without you. As the evening wore on, Emma allowed herself to savor the moment. She had come so far, but she knew this was only the beginning. The path ahead was still uncertain, but now she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She was ready to keep moving forward, with the knowledge that no matter where life took her, she would remain grounded in the person she had become. The following Monday, as Emma stepped into the office, she couldn't help but feel a quiet confidence settle over her. The future, once a daunting unknown, now felt like an exciting possibility. The company was on the brink of major growth, and she was leading the charge. But more importantly, Emma had found peace within herself. She knew that the key to true success wasn't just about achieving external milestones. It was about creating a life that was aligned with her deepest values. As she sat down at her desk, the phone buzzed again. It was a message from Sophia. You've made it, Em. You've built a future that's all your own. And I'm so proud of you. Emma smiled as she read the message, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She had built this future. She had found her balance. And most importantly, she had become the woman she was always meant to be. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?